Dr. Thelonious Vex was having a hell of a day. Staring at the readout screen of the alien zoo's main control room, he sipped his coffee, lukewarm like always, and sighed. Wormhole collapse, he muttered, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. Fantastic. Just what I needed. The control room was a cluttered mess of swirling holograms and blinking lights, all of which seemed determined to prove how utterly screwed they were. Vex had always thought of technology as a necessary evil, like taxes or dentists. Now, it seemed, technology had decided to bite back. His assistant, a young woman named Jax, peered over his shoulder, her eyes wide and worried. "Are you sure it's not just a glitch?" she asked, her voice tinged with the naive optimism of someone who hadn't yet been beaten down by life. "Maybe it's just temporary." "Oh sure, Jax. Maybe the wormhole's just taking a little vacation. A quick holiday to the Bermuda Triangle of the universe," Vex replied, sarcasm dripping from every word. "It's busted. We're cut off from Earth. Might as well start planning how to make a gourmet meal out of algae and despair." Jax bit her lip, glancing at the screen that depicted a growing red blob where the wormhole used to be. It was a cosmic screw-you from the universe itself. "So, what does this mean for us exactly?" she asked, her voice hushed like she was afraid to wake the sleeping giant of reality. "It means we're alone, Jax. No more shipments of real coffee, toilet paper, or sanity. We're stuck here with Earth's finest specimens, and by that, I mean a bunch of miserable animals and a handful of humans who are about as useful as a chocolate teapot." Vex rubbed his temples, feeling a headache brewing that even caffeine couldn't cure. The alien zoo was, in theory, a brilliant idea. A showcase of Earth's biodiversity in a far-flung corner of the galaxy, curated by a race of aliens who found humanity's antics amusing, like a live stream of kittens falling off couches. But without the wormhole, the zoo was just an elaborate prison with cages full of creatures that had no idea how screwed they were. Vex turned away from the screen, giving up on finding any hope in its glowing chaos. "We need to gather everyone. I don't want to be alone when the panic sets in. Misery loves company, after all." The hallways of the zoo were surprisingly quiet, the kind of quiet that sets your teeth on edge. The kind that says something's very wrong, and if you're lucky, you'll only realize it when it's too late to do anything about it. Vex and Jax walked in silence, the only sound the echo of their footsteps and the occasional distant animal call. A reminder that life, against all odds, goes on. They found the rest of the human crew in a small break room, where a perpetually malfunctioning vending machine promised snacks it had no intention of delivering. There was Ivan, a grizzled maintenance worker who looked like he'd wrestled a bear and lost, and Naya, a botanist whose love for plants was matched only by her disdain for people. "Gather around, folks. I bring tidings of great joy," Vex announced, entering the room with all the enthusiasm of a man about to deliver a eulogy. "The wormhole's gone. We're on our own." Ivan grunted, unimpressed. "Figures. I knew today felt too good to be true. Didn't stub my toe or spill my coffee. Should have known it was the calm before the storm." Naya looked up from a plant she was nurturing, one of the few life forms she actually cared about. "So that's it then. We're just stuck here. I always wanted to die surrounded by idiots. Well, unless someone here has a secret stash of wormhole repair kits, yes, we're stuck. So let's start thinking about how we can make this work." Vex slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on his shoulders. Jax, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Hey, maybe this is an opportunity. We can focus on the positives, like, space is really big and, we have each other, yeah, and space is full of things that want to kill us." "But sure, let's focus on the positives," Ivan retorted, rolling his eyes. As the group debated their next move, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that they'd become the punchline in some cosmic joke. Humanity, reduced to an exhibit in a zoo with no visitors. The irony was palpable, like a bad taste in his mouth that he couldn't swallow down. They spent the next few hours brainstorming, their ideas ranging from the hopelessly optimistic to the hilariously impractical. We could try to send a signal back to Earth, Jack suggested, her hope as resilient as a cockroach. Great idea, Vex replied, except for the minor detail that our communications equipment is as reliable as a politician's promise. And the last time the aliens stopped by, they took all the spare parts. Apparently they thought it would be fun to watch us squirm. Naya snorted, her laugh as sharp as a blade. Looks like we're stuck with each other and the animals. Better hope the aliens don't decide to add us to the menu. As night fell over the alien zoo, the crew dispersed, each retreating to their own corner of this interstellar madhouse. Vex stayed behind, staring out at the vastness of space, feeling more alone than ever. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance burned. Humanity had faced worse odds before. They'd survived wars, plagues, and reality TV. They'd survive this too, or die trying. Either way, it'd make for one hell of a story. Just as he was about to leave, a distant roar echoed through the corridors, a reminder that life in all its chaotic glory wasn't done with them yet. Vex turned on his heel and headed back inside, ready to face whatever fresh hell awaited them. After all, the show must go on. Dr. Thelonious Vex slouched into his chair, the weight of the universe squeezing his spine into a pretzel. His coffee mug, of course. It's empty, because why would today allow any pleasures, however small? Sat useless on the console. Outside the window, stars blinked like apathetic bystanders, and Vex couldn't shake the feeling they were mocking him. Just as he was contemplating the merits of banging his head against the wall, the zoo's alien curators stumbled into the control room in a flurry of panicked gestures and frantic alien chatter. They were tall, with skin that shimmered like oil slicks and eyes like overcooked eggs, perfect, considering their current mental state. Vex grimaced. Ah, the puppet masters arrive. What's the matter? All out of strings. The lead curator, who Vex had nicknamed Slinky because his limbs seemed to have been constructed by a particularly sadistic god of geometry, waved his arms like a malfunctioning windmill. Human, the wormhole. It is gone. It was a statement of the obvious wrapped in an oversized bow of panic. Jax, who was still trying to find the silver lining in a cloud made entirely of lead, jumped in. Yeah, we noticed. Any helpful alien magic to fix it? Slinky's eyes bulged, more out of confusion than surprise. Magic? No, no magic. We rely on your kind for such things. Ah, Vex said with the kind of calm you only achieve when you've transcended panic into pure nihilism. We're the monkeys with the tools, and now we're two less. Delightful. The aliens conferred among themselves, their whispers a mix of clicks and hisses, before retreating to their corner of the room to stress vibrate in peace. Enter Zephyr Quinn, the station's tech-savvy engineer. If optimism was a disease, Zephyr was the cure. His entrance was always as if he just heard the world's best joke and he wasn't keen on sharing. He strolled in, hands tucked into his jumpsuit pockets, chewing on what might have been gum or possibly a piece of insulation. Hey, heard we lost our shortcut back to McDonald's. What's the plan? We were just discussing the merits of joint suicide or possibly eating each other. Got any preference? Vex replied without missing a beat. Zephyr chuckled as if Vex had just delivered a killer punchline. Well, before we start choosing who gets the BBQ sauce, maybe we should see if there's any way to fix our little shortcut. The fix, Ivan interjected, scratching his beard that resembled an unruly bird's nest, involves technology we don't have. Isn't that the mantra of every engineer? Jax quipped, a grin breaking through her worries. Vex gestured at the screen, where the visual representation of their cosmic predicament pulsed ominously. We've got a wormhole-shaped hole in our lives, and it's not filling itself. Ideas. Zephyr shrugged, his default response to crises. We could try boosting a signal. Maybe there's a relay out there we can tap into, something that'll scream loud enough for someone to hear. And how do you propose we scream? Naya asked, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. We barely have enough juice to keep the lights on. Zephyr's grin widened. Oh, I've got a few zany tricks up my sleeve. Might blow us up, but at least we'll go out with a bang. Vex sighed, which felt like his new hobby. Fine, do what you can. If we're gonna die out here, might as well give the universe one last middle finger. With a plan that was barely more than a suggestion, the group dispersed, leaving Vex to stew in his own thoughts. The curators had retreated to their quarters, leaving the humans to their own devices. Small mercy, that. Ior's passed in a blur of failed attempts and colorful curses. Zephyr and Jax worked tirelessly in the control room, surrounded by a forest of wires and circuit boards that had been gutted from every conceivable piece of non-essential equipment. Vex wandered over, curious how badly things were going. "So how's the Frankenstein project?" he asked, eyeing the jury-rigged monstrosity that was presumably their salvation. Zephyr wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grime. "If it works, we might get a signal to bounce back to Earth. If it doesn't, well, at least the last thing we'll see is an impressive light show." "Great. I love fireworks," Vex mumbled, though a part of him, maybe the part that hadn't been crushed by despair, hoped Zephyr's optimism might carry them through this mess. Meanwhile, Jax fidgeted with a bundle of cables that looked like a particularly stubborn spaghetti monster. "Hey, even if this doesn't work, at least we're not sitting around doing nothing, right?" "True," Vex agreed. Doing nothing is overrated. The irony of their situation was as thick as the tension in the air. A zoo with no visitors, humans with no Earth, and a plan so desperate it might just work, or kill them all. Either way, it was something to do before the inevitable end. Ior stretched into a night that was indistinguishable from day in the artificial lighting of the zoo. Vex realized he missed the concept of sunrise and sunset, those little markers that reminded you time was still a thing. Here, time was just another silent mockery, ticking away as they fiddled with the universe's broken toys. Eventually, Zephyr called everyone back to the control room. His expression was a cocktail of exhaustion and manic excitement. "All right, folks, I think I've hotwired us a shot." Everyone gathered around, a motley crew of hope and cynicism. Vex, Ivan, Naya, Jax, and of course, the alien curators who had reappeared looking hopeful and slightly less panicked. Zephyr stood by his cobbled-together contraption, the digital Frankenstein that might just scream loud enough to be heard across the stars. "We're gonna give it a whirl. Cross your fingers, legs, whatever you got." He flicked a switch and the room was suddenly alive with a hum that rattled Vex's teeth. Lights flickered, screens flashed, and everyone held their breath as the noise built to a crescendo that threatened to shatter glass. And then, silence. The kind that follows a catastrophic explosion, except they were all still in one piece. "Did it work?" Jax asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zephyr checked the readouts, his fingers tapping at the console with the precision of a concert pianist or a bomb diffuser. "We're transmitting. No idea if it's reaching anyone, but it's out there." Vex nodded, a strange sensation of pride swelling in his chest. "Well, here's hoping someone hears it. Or at least that they wait to laugh until after they rescue us," Ivan added. The room relaxed slightly. A win, even a small one, was still a win. It was something to hold onto in the vast, indifferent expanse of space, a pinprick of hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way back home. But for now, while they waited for a response that might never come, they had each other. A group of humans, an engineer with a god complex, a botanist with a love-hate relationship with humanity, and a young assistant who believed in silver linings. And of course, their alien curators, who had realized that perhaps humanity was more than just a good joke to watch unfold. In the end, maybe that was enough. The universe might have dealt them a lousy hand, but they were still playing the game. And until the cards ran out, they'd keep bluffing with the best of them. The control room was silent save for the faint hum of machinery and the occasional nervous shuffle from the alien curators. Dr. Thelonious Vex, feeling as if the universe had just given him a swift kick to the crotch, leaned back in his chair and let out a long, exasperated sigh. "Well, folks," he drawled, Looks like our cosmic distress signal's gone into the void, probably to join all the socks I keep losing. Zephyr, still buzzing from the adrenaline of their recent attempt, shrugged like a man who just lost a bet he never expected to win. Hey, at least we tried, right? I mean, next time we'll have a better shot, assuming there's a next time. That's the spirit, Vex replied dryly. Keep the optimism high and the expectations low. Jax, fiddling with a loose wire that had somehow become her new stress toy, chimed in. Well, it's not like we expected a cavalry of starships to swoop in and rescue us. Hell, I'd settle for a pizza delivery at this point. The tension, ever present like a bad smell, seemed to thicken as the initial buzz of activity dwindled into the grim reality of their situation. Supplies were running low, and the prospect of facing a slow, resource-starved demise seemed more realistic than ever. Slinky, ever the bearer of awkwardly timed news, shuffled closer, limbs flailing with each step. Human, he began, his voice a peculiar mix of reverence and desperation. We require assistance. Vex rubbed his temples where a headache had decided to set up camp. Join the line, friend. We're all in the needy club now. Our resources, Slinky hesitated, are diminishing. Welcome to the apocalypse, pal. Vex turned to face the rest of the crew, his expression one of grim determination. All right, team, we need a plan. Suggestions. Naya, ever the practical one, leaned against a wall that looked like it had been painted with existential despair. We could ration, but that's not gonna last long. Zephyr tapped his chin thoughtfully. There might be some supplies we haven't raided yet. Or, we can start getting creative with the alien flora and fauna. Alien zoo cuisine, Jax quipped, a sardonic smile creeping across her face. Sounds like a hit cooking show, but it wasn't just the lack of food and water that gnawed at them. It was the sense of isolation, of being cut off from the world they knew, of fading into obscurity like a bad sitcom canceled before its time. Vex, resigned to the madness, decided to go for a walk. As he navigated the labyrinth of corridors, he stumbled upon a door he hadn't noticed before. It was hidden behind a mass of vines, the kind that seemed to grow only to annoy space travelers. Curiosity piqued, he pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, and the air felt stale as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. In the center stood a series of dormant pods, their surfaces coated in dust. At first glance, they almost resembled coffins, which seemed fitting given the mood of the place. What the hell? Vex muttered, stepping closer to examine one of them. A plaque caught his eye, its lettering faint but legible. Asterisk human cloning lab, authorized personnel only asterisk. Blinking slowly, Vex processed the discovery. A cloning lab, here. His mind raced with possibilities, each more ethically dubious than the last. So found yourself a nice little crypt to haunt. Zephyr's voice broke the silence as he appeared in the doorway, looking around with interest. Not quite, Vex replied, gesturing towards the pods. Cloning lab, our very own human Xerox machine. Zephyr let out a low whistle. Well, isn't this a twist? I mean, if we run out of Jax, we can always make a new one. Funny, came Jax's voice from behind Zephyr as she joined them, her eyes widening at the sight. I always wanted a twin, but not like this. They gathered around the pods, the implications sinking in. This was a potential solution to their resource problem, albeit one wrapped in a moral conundrum. So what's the deal? Zephyr asked, leaning closer to inspect a console near the pods. Can we make clones of ourselves and send them to do all the hard work? Possibly, Vex replied, rubbing his chin. The question is, should we? I mean, what kind of life are we giving those poor bastards? Just a repeat of our misery. Ethics aside, Naya said, joining the discussion, could we even get this thing working? It's been dormant for who knows how long. Zephyr's eyes gleamed with the thrill of a challenge. Oh, you know me, give me some duct tape and hope and I can fix anything. Jax crossed her arms, skepticism etched on her face. And what if we do get it running? What then? Do we just pop out clones like yesterday's leftovers? We're not exactly swimming in options, Vex replied, his tone serious. We need to consider every possibility, even the uncomfortable ones. If this lab can give us a chance, any chance, we need to take it." The group fell silent, each wrestling with their own thoughts. The idea of cloning, of creating life in such a desperate context, was both tantalizing and terrifying. "Well," Zephyr finally said, breaking the tension, "I say we look into it. Worst case scenario, we blow up another room, right?" Vex agreed, nodding slowly. "Let's see what we've got here." They spent the next few hours examining the equipment, assessing its condition and figuring out how it all worked. The room felt alive with purpose, a bizarre laboratory of last hopes. As they tinkered, Jax couldn't help but voice what they were all thinking. "You know, it's kinda ironic. We're thinking about making new humans to survive, while the universe seems hell-bent on wiping us out. That's the human condition for you," Vex quipped, fiddling with a particularly stubborn panel. "Always trying to stick around like a bad rash." Zephyr chuckled, adjusting a series of wires. "Yeah, but we're the most entertaining rash the universe has ever seen." The alien curators had stayed quiet, possibly overwhelmed by the humans' unique approach to existential crises. Slinky, however, finally spoke up, his curiosity overcoming his hesitation. "You create more of yourselves, like replication." "More or less," Vex replied, not looking up from his work. "Our ancestors would either be very proud or very horrified. Probably both." As the hours ticked by, the lab systems began to flicker to life, casting an eerie glow over the room. Vex, Zephyr, and the others exchanged glances, a rare spark of hope shared among them. "This just might work," Naya said, a mix of disbelief and excitement in her voice. "Let's hope it does," Vex replied, his voice steady despite the swirling uncertainty in his mind. "If we play our cards right, this might just buy us enough time to get out of this mess." He knew it was a gamble, a high-stakes game with no guarantees. But wasn't that what life was, really? Just one big cosmic gamble, full of risks and rewards, failures and triumphs. For now, they'd keep playing, keep pushing against the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. And if they managed to pull off this mad plan, maybe they'd add another chapter to humanity's long, stubborn story, a story of survival against all odds. The cloning lab remained their secret, a glimmer of hope veiled in ethical grayness. They had a chance to rewrite their fate, to cheat the hand they'd been dealt. It wasn't the perfect solution, but in the grand scheme of things, perfection was a luxury they couldn't afford. As they closed up the lab for the night, Vex took one last look at the dormant pods, their potential resting quietly in the dim light. With a final nod to his crew, he led them back to the control room, leaving behind the echoes of a choice that could change everything. In the end, they were human, flawed, stubborn, and endlessly resilient. And whatever the future held, they'd face it together, one snarky comment at a time. The control room was a mess of swirling holograms and blinking lights, like a rave for terminally depressed robots. It was, in other words, a typical day in the ass end of the universe. Dr. Thelonious Vex sat hunched over a console, fingers stained with grease and a healthy side of anxiety. His team was a ragtag bunch of misfits that made the cast of a bad reality show look competent. At least they were entertaining. "Thelonious, you ever feel like the universe is one big joke and we're the punchline?" Jax asked, twirling a loose wire with a dexterity that suggested she'd either been a magician or a cat in a past life. "Only every single day," Vex replied, not looking up. "We're marooned here, Jax, not guest stars on an existential comedy special." "Aw, and I thought my laugh track was finally coming in," Jax said with a grin that could light up a black hole. Zephyr Quinn, the tech-savvy optimist of the group, was already knee-deep in a tangled mess of circuits. "No worries, folks. There's always a solution if you look hard enough. Or if you squint really hard and lie to yourself." "God bless your unyielding optimism," Vex muttered, not entirely sarcastically. Meanwhile, Slinky, their alien curator with a penchant for dramatic entrances, flopped into the room with all the subtlety of a crashing spaceship. Humans, he said, his voice a peculiar blend of awe and desperation. Trouble brews. You mean besides the impending doom and starvation? Naya chimed in, leaning against a console like a noir detective with better hair. Slinky hesitated, clearly not used to humanity's coping mechanism of sarcasm. Some of my kind. They fear what you might do with the cloning technology. Ah, the classic humans are scary narrative. As if we don't scare ourselves, Jax said, rolling her eyes. Vex groaned, feeling a familiar headache take residence behind his eyes. So what are they plotting? Lock us in a closet until we promise to be nice. They might sabotage your efforts, Slinky admitted, his limbs twitching with what could only be described as alien anxiety. Fantastic, Vex said, throwing his hands up. Just what we needed, space politics on top of everything else. It's as if the universe thinks we're not suffering enough, Zephyr added, his fingers never stopping their work on the circuits. So what's the plan, boss? Naya asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. Vex knew they needed a plan, something to keep them from spiraling into chaos like a soap opera with too much budget and not enough plot. Quinn, you mentioned something about the zoo's tech. Care to enlighten us? Zephyr's eyes sparkled with a kind of manic excitement that was both reassuring and terrifying. Yeah, the alien zoo's tech operates on some crazy advanced principles. We could use it to stabilize a new wormhole. Theoretically, of course. Theoretically? You're killing me, Quinn, Jax quipped, her voice dripping with mock exasperation. Hey, it's a better shot than cloning ourselves into oblivion, Zephyr countered. Vex considered their options, which were as appealing as a cold shower in a blizzard. All right, let's see what we can rig up. If we manage to pull this off, we might just flip the universe the bird and live to tell the tale. Naya cleared her throat. What about the aliens? If they're planning on sabotaging us, we need a countermeasure. Right, Vex agreed, rubbing his temples. Maybe we can convince them that we're more useful alive and cooperative. Or at least more entertaining. The crew set to work, a motley assortment of hopes and fears. Zephyr led the charge, his optimism a beacon in the gloom of the control room. They needed to tap into the zoo's tech, a series of complex systems that made hacking into a government database look like child's play. Okay, here goes nothing, Zephyr muttered, his hands moving with a speed and precision that belied his casual demeanor. Just don't blow us up, Vex said, watching with a mix of awe and trepidation. Hours ticked by, marked by the incessant hum of the machinery and the occasional interjection of dark humor to keep the existential dread at bay. The crew worked tirelessly, each member playing their part in this desperate gamble. Do you ever wonder if any of this will matter? Jax asked, her voice light despite the weight of the question. Probably not, Vex replied, his tone flat. But we're here, so we might as well try. As they delved deeper into the alien tech, it became clear that this was no ordinary system. The zoo's interface was as intuitive as a drunk octopus playing chess, but Zephyr had a knack for these things, and his hands danced over the controls with the dexterity of a concert pianist on a caffeine high. Almost there, Zephyr said, a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice, but the crew pressed on, fueled by the slim hope that they might just pull off a miracle. The alien curators milled about, looking as anxious as a herd of cats in a dog park. And then, as if on cue, the entire system lit up like a Christmas tree on steroids. The holographic display flashed with a series of symbols that seemed to dance with delight. Zephyr let out a whoop of triumph. We've got it. At least I think we do. Define think, Jax said, eyeing the display as if it might sprout legs and start doing the cha-cha. Zephyr grinned, his optimism unwavering. We've stabilized a potential wormhole pathway. Now we just need to convince our alien friends not to blow it up. Piece of cake, Vex said dryly. Aliens love us, right? We're like their favorite sitcom. Naya snorted. More like a train wreck they can't look away from. Vex chuckled despite himself. Okay, let's gather the curators and see if we can sell them on this plan. The crew moved to a briefing room, an austere space filled with chairs that looked more like torture devices than seating. The alien curators gathered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Slinky stood at the forefront, his limbs twitching with nervous anticipation. "All right, folks," Vex began, adopting his best "trust me, I'm a doctor" voice. "We have a potential solution to our little predicament, but we'll need your cooperation to make it work." The aliens exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable but not hostile. "Not yet, anyway. We know some of you are worried about what we might do with the cloning tech," Zephyr added, his tone sincere. "But believe me, we're just as concerned about the ethical implications." "Speak for yourself," Jax muttered under her breath, earning a nudge from Naya. "What we're proposing," Vex continued, "is to use the zoo's advanced tech to stabilize a new wormhole. This could be our ticket out of here and we could all benefit." Slinky stepped forward, his gaze earnest. "And how do we know you won't use this against us?" "Because," Naya replied, crossing her arms, "if we wanted to, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We just do it." Jax grinned. "We're not exactly subtle when it comes to that sort of thing." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. The aliens considered their options, weighing their fears against the potential benefits. It was a gamble, but then everything was these days. "We agree," Slinky said finally, his voice steady. "But know this, if you betray our trust, we will act accordingly." "Fair enough," Vex said, offering a nod of respect. "Let's get to work then. The sooner we open that wormhole, the sooner we can all get back to our regularly scheduled programming." With the aliens tentatively on board, the crew threw themselves into the task with renewed vigor. The prospect of escape was a tantalizing carrot at the end of a very long, very dark tunnel. Zephyr and the team worked tirelessly, fine-tuning the systems and double-checking every circuit. It was a race against time, but they were determined to see it through. As the final adjustments were made, Vex allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. "So, what's the plan if this goes sideways?" Jax asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. "We improvise," Vex replied, a wry smile on his lips. "We're good at that." Naya chuckled. "Here's to hoping we won't need to." With everything in place, Zephyr stood back, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. "All right, folks, moment of truth." The room held its collective breath as they activated the system. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your skin tingle and your heart race. And then, with a surge of energy that sent shivers down their spines, the wormhole began to stabilize. The display lit up with a kaleidoscope of colors, a swirling vortex of potential and possibility. "Looks like we did it," Vex said, relief washing over him like a tidal wave. "Not bad for a bunch of marooned humans," Jax quipped, her grin infectious. The crew erupted into cheers, their voices a chorus of triumph and disbelief. Against all odds, they'd managed to pull off the impossible. But the celebration was short-lived. The aliens watched with wary eyes, their trust still fragile. The crew knew they still had work to do, but for now this small victory was enough. As the holographic display flickered with the promise of escape, Vex allowed himself a rare smile. Maybe they weren't as doomed as they thought. Maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way back home. For now, they'd savor this moment, this fleeting glimpse of hope. Because in the vast, uncaring universe, hope was the one thing they could cling to, no matter how absurd it seemed. And sometimes, absurdity was all you needed to keep going. Thelonious Vex rubbed his temples, trying to squeeze the tension out before it exploded into a full-blown migraine. The control room hummed with a sort of anxious energy, the crew's nerves fraying like ancient wiring. The holographic display flickered inconsistently, as if taunting them with the precariousness of their situation. They were as close to saving themselves as a pirate is to retirement, a mere fantasy. Jax was the first to break the silence, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. "So, Vex, what's the plan if our alien friends decide to pull the plug on our cosmic magic trick?" "Improvise," Vex replied wearily. It had become their mantra, their unofficial battle cry. "Great," Jax said with a smirk. I'll add that to our growing list of strategies right next to wing it and hope for the best. Zephyr, fiddling with the circuits like some tech-savvy wizard, chimed in. Don't knock it. Those plans have a 50% success rate. 50% of the time they work every time, which is more than we can say for our luck lately, Vex muttered, glancing at the dwindling supplies. If Earth was a distant memory, then a well-stocked pantry was a fairy tale. Just then, Slinky made his entrance, because of course he did, his elongated limbs casting dramatic shadows across the room. It was as if he couldn't help but make every entrance like he was auditioning for a role in the next big space opera. "We have a problem," he announced, because when did they not? "Is it the kind of problem that comes with a solution, or just the kind that adds more gray hair to my collection?" Vex asked, looking expectantly at Slinky. "The saboteurs. They've breached the zoo perimeter. If they succeed, they could destabilize the system and we all end up as space dust." Naya, leaning against a console with the casual air of someone expecting the worst, let out a low whistle. "Guess we really are the universe's favorite sitcom after all. Just when you think it can't get worse, boom, plot twist." Vex inhaled sharply, his mind racing. "Okay, let's keep it simple. Zephyr, focus on locking down the wormhole system. Jax, you're with me. We're gonna play whack-a-mole with some saboteurs." "Do I get a weapon?" Jax asked, her eyes gleaming with a hint of excitement. Vex sighed. "You're a magician. Control them with your mind or something." Jax rolled her eyes but followed Vex out of the room, leaving Zephyr and Naya to hold down the fort with the precision of circus jugglers on caffeine. Out in the zoo, Vex and Jax navigated the twisting corridors of alien flora and fauna. The air was thick with the smell of something that might have been a relative of Earth's wet dog, only more exotic. Vex wondered if the aliens found them equally pungent. "There," Jax whispered, pointing to a shadowy figure fiddling with one of the zoo's control panels. "Looks like our saboteur came with a toolkit." Vex gritted his teeth, edging forward. "Let's give them a warm welcome." The saboteur, a wiry creature with more limbs than Vex was comfortable counting, looked up, eyes wide with surprise. "Hey there," Vex said, approaching with what he hoped was a disarming smile. "Fancy meeting you here. Planning a little unauthorized maintenance." The alien hissed something incomprehensible, and Jax stepped forward, her hands flicking in a way that suggested a magic trick or a physical threat. It was hard to tell with Jax. "Look, mate," she said, "we've had a rough day. How about you drop the tools and we all pretend this never happened, eh?" The saboteur hesitated, glancing between Vex and Jax, weighing their options. Vex felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine. This could go one of two ways, and he wasn't feeling particularly lucky. Back in the control room, things weren't exactly going swimmingly. Zephyr was neck-deep in circuits, muttering to himself like a mad scientist trying to solve a particularly vexing crossword puzzle. Naya kept watch, her eyes never leaving the door. "Zephyr, tell me you've got some good news," she said, not bothering to hide the stress in her voice. "Define good," Zephyr replied without looking up, "because I think I've almost isolated the wormhole stabilizer. Of course, by almost I mean I have no idea if this will actually work." "Fantastic," Naya said dryly. "Our survival depends on a maybe." "Think of it this way," Zephyr said with a grin. "It's like playing the lottery. You either win big or you get crushed under a mountain of despair." "Comforting," Naya quipped. "Now hurry up before we end up as cosmic confetti." Out in the zoo, Vex and Jax's standoff with the saboteur reached its climax. The alien dashed towards the exit, hoping to escape. Jax was quicker, her hand snapping out like a viper, grabbing the toolbox and yanking it from its grasp. Vex stepped in, intercepting the alien with all the grace of a sleep-deprived sloth. "Not so fast, buddy. We're not done here." Jax flipped the toolbox open, her eyes scanning its contents. "Looks like a bunch of wires, a few gadgets I can't pronounce, and oh, what's this?" She held up a device that looked suspiciously like it belonged in a different kind of story, one with less conversation and more explosions. "The detonator," Vex said, feeling a pit open in his stomach. "They were planning to blow the system." "Could have told you that," Jax replied, tossing the device from hand to hand. I love it when they make things interesting. Vex glared at the saboteur, whose expression was unreadable but unmistakably defiant. You're playing a dangerous game. What's in it for you? The alien hissed again, and this time Vex understood enough to piece together its intent. They weren't just after chaos for chaos's sake. This was sabotage with a purpose, a mission to ensure that humanity remained trapped, a delightful game for some alien overlord. Great, Vex muttered. We're not just a sitcom, we're a reality show now. Jax shrugged. Everyone loves a good cliffhanger. Back in the control room, Zephyr finally managed to isolate the wormhole stabilizer, his fingers moving with a frenzied dexterity that could only come from sheer desperation. He wiped his brow, feeling the adrenaline pulse through his veins. Okay, Naya, I think we're ready, he said, his voice crackling with a mix of excitement and fear. Naya nodded, her expression grim but determined. Fire it up. Let's see if this can hold. Zephyr activated the system, the room humming with energy as the stabilizer went to work. The holographic display flickered, the swirling vortex of colors stabilizing into a coherent wormhole. At least that was the hope. For a moment, everything seemed to hold. The wormhole shimmered, a beacon of potential escape. Vex and Jax arrived just in time to see the display come to life, their expressions a mix of hope and disbelief. Looks like you managed to pull a rabbit out of a hat, Zephyr, Vex said, his relief evident. Don't thank me yet, Zephyr replied. This thing's held together by duct tape and optimism. We still need to keep the saboteurs at bay until we're sure it'll hold. The crew exchanged glances, the weight of their predicament not lost on any of them. They were balanced on a knife's edge, one misstep away from disaster. What about our friend here? Jax asked, gesturing to the captured saboteur. Let's keep them close, Vex decided. If they were sent to stop us, they might have some useful intel. Plus, I'd rather they weren't running around causing more trouble. Practical, Naya said, her voice edged with a wry amusement. As long as we're not adopting them. The saboteur was secured in a corner of the control room, its expression one of simmering resentment. The crew couldn't afford to let their guard down, not with so much at stake. All right, Vex said, focusing on the task at hand. Let's keep this wormhole stable. If it holds, we're one step closer to getting out of this cosmic zoo. Fingers crossed, Jax muttered, her eyes scanning the room for any more surprises. The tension was thick, the room silent but for the hum of technology and the steady breaths of its occupants. In that moment, as they watched the wormhole shimmer with possibility, hope felt like a tangible thing, fragile but undeniably real. We're not done yet, Vex said, more to himself than anyone else. But we've got a fighting chance. The crew settled into their roles, an unlikely band of heroes in the unlikeliest of circumstances. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly out of time, but they were still here, still fighting. And sometimes, in the vast, uncaring expanse of the universe, that was enough. At least for now. The first thing you learn in Interstellar Survival 101 is never trust a miracle. The second thing is to always have an ancient human artifact handy, preferably one with mystical capabilities. Quinn, our resident optimist and self-proclaimed tech whisperer, had one such artifact, an old Earth toaster. Sure, it was a bit unconventional, but when the universe handed you lemons, well, you made lemonade, or in this case, you jury-rigged a wormhole stabilizer. Now I know this looks like a glorified bread burner, Quinn explained, holding the toaster with a reverence usually reserved for religious relics. But trust me, this baby's gonna power our way out here. Vex, fighting off a migraine that threatened to split his skull, eyed the toaster skeptically. You telling me we've been sitting on a galactic escape route disguised as a kitchen appliance? Quinn grinned, his eyes glinting with manic enthusiasm. Exactly. You see, this toaster's housing a rare Earth element, call it dumb luck or divine intervention. Well, I always thought toast could save the world, Jax quipped, crossing her arms. Never thought it'd be this literal. As Quinn hooked the toaster into the stabilizer, the control room buzzed with newfound energy. The holographic display flickered, casting a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the walls. For a moment, hope felt less like a distant dream and more like a tangible reality. "All right, team, let's focus," Vex said, imposing order with the authority of someone who was one bad day away from a complete mental breakdown. "Quinn, get that wormhole online. Jax, Slinky, keep an eye out for any unwelcome guests. Naya, you're on comms." "I don't want any surprises. Surprises keep things interesting," Jax said, sliding into her role with a swagger that made you believe she could probably charm the pants off a black hole. "Yeah, and interesting is what gets us killed," Naya muttered, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension in the room. Meanwhile, back in the alien zoo, Slinky was doing what he did best, being dramatic. He slinked through the foliage, a tall shadow amid the vibrant ecosystem, his eyes scanning for any sign of sabotage. The saboteurs had retreated, but Slinky knew better than to assume they'd given up. "Just a matter of time before they try something else," he mumbled to himself, twirling a screwdriver like it was a rapier. Always a flair for the dramatic, these alien types. As if on cue, a shudder ran through the structure, reverberating underfoot like a giant's heartbeat. Slinky's instincts screamed danger, and he sprinted back towards the control room with the urgency of a man who'd seen one too many horror movies. Back in the control room, Quinn's ancient toaster was doing its thing, channels of energy flowing through the stabilizer with a hum that was almost musical. "We're almost there," Quinn announced, his fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of an orchestra conductor on speed. Vex let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Good. I'd rather not spend my retirement in this cosmic petting zoo." The door slid open and Slinky burst in, all limbs in panic. "They're planning another attack," he gasped, his dramatic entrance a well-practiced art. "This time they're bringing friends." "Of course they are," Vex muttered, rubbing his temples. "Because why wouldn't they? They just can't take a hint," Jax said, checking her equipment with the casual ease of someone who thrived on chaos. "Guess it's time for another round of whack-a-saboteur." The saboteur they'd captured earlier shifted uncomfortably in the corner, watching them with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Vex turned to Quinn, who was still engrossed in his work. "How much longer?" "Just a few more minutes," Quinn replied, not looking up. "Assuming this thing doesn't blow up in my face." "Optimistic as always," Naya said dryly, her eyes glued to the comms system. "We've got incoming signals. Looks like they're trying to jam us." "Wonderful," Vex said, his tone lacking any real enthusiasm. "Let's not make it easy for them." The control room crackled with tension, each crew member poised for action. They could hear the distant clatter of metal on metal, a sound that had become synonymous with impending doom. "All right, team," Vex said, rallying his troops like a beleaguered captain steering a sinking ship. "Let's show them why humans are the universe's most annoying species." Jax grinned, her teeth flashing in the dim light. "I didn't come all this way to get killed by some wannabe alien overlord." The saboteurs launched their assault, a coordinated effort to destabilize the wormhole and ensure the humans remained trapped. Vex braced himself, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline propel him into action. "Hold the line," he shouted, as if they were standing on some ancient battlefield instead of a high-tech interstellar zoo. "We need to buy Quinn more time." Jax moved like a whirlwind, her presence a blur of motion as she intercepted the first wave. Slinky, ever the dramatist, deployed his defensive measures with a flourish, his movements more reminiscent of a theatrical performance than a tactical maneuver. Naya, steady as ever, kept the communications open, countering the alien jammers with a deftness that belied her dry humor. "They're persistent, I'll give them that," she muttered, fingers flying over the keys. Vex took his position near the entrance, ready to fend off any intruders who made it past the initial defense. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind focused on the task at hand. There was no room for doubt, no time for hesitation. Almost there, Quinn shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos like a beacon. Just a little longer, the saboteurs pressed their advantage, exploiting every weakness with an efficiency that was downright infuriating. Vex fought them back, his movements precise and calculated, each swing of his weapon an act of defiance. "We can't hold them forever," Jax called out, her voice edged with determination. "Hope you've got a plan B." "Vex, plan B is not dying," Vex retorted, blocking a particularly aggressive saboteur with a well-placed elbow. The room was a whirlwind of activity, each crew member performing their roles with the urgency of those who understood what was at stake. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not out of fight. Not yet. With a final flourish, Quinn completed the stabilizer circuit, the toaster humming to life as it channeled its energy into the system. The holographic display stabilized, the wormhole shimmering with potential. "We've got it," Quinn shouted, triumph lifting his voice. "The wormhole's stable, finally," Vex breathed, relief washing over him like a tidal wave. "Now let's get the hell out of here." The saboteurs, realizing their efforts were in vain, made a hasty retreat, their defeat evident in their rapid departure. The crew watched them go, a mixture of adrenaline and exhaustion weighing heavily on their shoulders. "We did it," Naya said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "We actually did it. Don't sound so surprised," Jax said, her tone light despite the gravity of their situation. "We're humans. Persistence is in our blood." Vex allowed himself a moment to savor the victory, the knowledge that they'd beaten the odds settling into his bones. They'd faced impossible challenges, overcome insurmountable obstacles, and somehow they'd come out on top. "All right, team," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Let's move before they decide on a rematch." The crew mobilized, their movements quick and purposeful as they prepared to leave the alien zoo behind. There was still much to be done, still a long journey ahead, but for the first time in what felt like forever, hope was more than just a fleeting dream. As they stepped towards the shimmering wormhole, Vex couldn't help but smile, albeit wryly, at the absurdity of it all. They were still outnumbered, still outgunned, but they were human. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving against the odds. "Ready?" Vex asked, looking at his team with a mix of pride and fond exasperation. "Born ready," Jax replied, her grin infectious. "Let's do this," Quinn said, holding the toaster aloft like a talisman. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Naya added, her sarcasm tempered by genuine determination. "Then let's go," Vex said, stepping forward with a resolve that matched the stubborn resilience of his species. They had a wormhole to catch and a universe to prove wrong. The crew moved as one, united by purpose and driven by the unyielding spirit that defined humanity. They were battered, bruised, but unbroken. And as they stepped through the wormhole, ready to face whatever lay on the other side, they knew one thing for certain. They'd come this far, and they weren't about to stop now. Not by a long shot. Thelonious Vex squinted into the wormhole like it was an old friend who owed him money. The thing shimmered with the promise of salvation, or obliteration, depending on your outlook. For Vex, it was just another migraine waiting to happen. "All right, team," he said, rallying his crew with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just realized he was out of coffee. "We've got a wormhole, a toaster, and a planet that thinks we've forgotten about it. Let's not disappoint." Jax tossed a grin over her shoulder, confidence radiating from her like she just won the galactic lottery. "Oh, disappointments are for amateurs, Vex. Good thing we're professionals." Naya shot back from her post at the comms, her fingers dancing over the keys with the precision of someone who could probably defuse a bomb with a toothpick. Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, Quinn was still basking in the afterglow of his toaster triumph. The ancient artifact hummed contentedly, a hero in its own unlikely way. "I always knew my obsession with old human junk would pay off," he said, grinning like a kid who'd just found the last cookie in the jar. "You say junk. I say miracle of modern technology," Slinky piped up, his dramatic flair evident even when he was just leaning against the wall like a noir detective. "You ever think we're just living in a cosmic sitcom and nobody told us?" Vex turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Feel like the punchline most days." The control room buzzed with energy, a hive of activity as the crew prepared to make the leap. The holographic display flickered anew, the colors vibrant and reassuring. An omen that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't end up as cosmic debris. "Wormhole stable," Quinn reported, his voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We're good to go." "About time," Vex said, his voice coated with relief. "Let's reconnect with Earth and see if they've missed us." "Missed us?" Jax snorted, rolling her eyes. "They probably threw a party." Vex allowed himself a small smile. "Well, let's crash it, shall we?" The crew moved with renewed purpose, each one driven by the prospect of finally returning home. Despite the sardonic humor and wry banter, there was a sense of camaraderie among them, an understanding that they were in this together, come hell or high water. With the flick of a switch, the wormhole surged to life, its energy coursing through the room like an electric current. Naya monitored the signals, her expression a mask of concentration. "We've got a green light," she announced, her voice steady and sure. "All right, folks," Vex said, taking a deep breath. "This is it. Let's make it count." They stepped forward as a unit, each one bracing for the unknown. The wormhole loomed before them, a swirling vortex of possibility. Vex felt a familiar twinge of anxiety, but he pushed it aside. There was no room for doubt now. As they crossed the threshold, the world shifted around them. The sensation was akin to being caught in a riptide, disorienting, yet somehow exhilarating. Vex's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. And then, just like that, they were through. The transition was seamless, their surroundings shifting from the sterile confines of the control room to the familiar chaos of Earth's spaceport. The air crackled with activity, the sounds of human life a symphony of chaos and order. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Jax said, her tone laced with dry amusement as she surveyed the bustling scene. "I was expecting, I don't know, fireworks or something." "Fireworks are for when we're not in danger of spontaneously combusting," Vex replied, scanning the area for any sign of trouble. Quinn clutched his toaster, a look of triumph on his face. "The real fireworks are internal, my friends." "Quinn, have you been reading those self-help books again?" Naya asked, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Hey, I'm just saying the hero's journey is all about personal growth," Quinn shot back, unperturbed. Slinky, ever the dramatist, struck a pose that wouldn't look out of place on a theater stage. "Ah, Earth. Home sweet home and an all-you-can-eat buffet of existential dread." Vex shook his head, a chuckle escaping despite himself. "Never change, Slinky." As they made their way through the spaceport, the crew was greeted by a cacophony of voices, each one more urgent than the last. The news of the wormhole stabilization had spread like wildfire, and the implications were staggering. They were heroes, or so the crowd seemed to think. Vex wasn't so sure. Heroes were the ones who got statues and accolades, not headaches and sleepless nights. "Looks like we're famous," Jax said, her voice dripping with irony. "Yeah, until they realize we're just a bunch of idiots with a lucky toaster," Vex replied, rubbing the back of his neck. The crew navigated the throng of people, each one eager to catch a glimpse of the team that had defied the odds. There were reporters clamoring for interviews, officials demanding debriefings, and curious onlookers just happy to be part of the spectacle. "Vex, over here." A voice called from the crowd, piercing through the din. He turned to see a familiar face emerging from the sea of bodies. It was Dr. Ilara Kincaid, his mentor and the closest thing he had to family. Her expression was a mix of relief and exasperation. "Thelonious Vex, you absolute madman," she said, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "I should have known you'd find a way to pull this off. Couldn't have done it without my team," Vex replied, returning the hug with equal fervor. Kincaid pulled back, her eyes scanning the group with a mixture of pride and admiration. "You've all done something incredible. The wormhole's stabilization has opened up new possibilities." Your heroes, if only it felt that way, Naya muttered, crossing her arms. Kincaid chuckled, her gaze softening. Welcome back to Earth. We've got a lot to catch up on. As the crew regrouped, Vex felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They'd done it. They'd beaten the odds and reconnected with their home. It was a victory, however small, and one that would have far-reaching consequences. Let's get out of here, Vex said, nodding towards the exit. We've got a lot to discuss. As they made their way out of the spaceport, Vex couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation that hummed beneath the surface. They'd come a long way, and there was still much to be done. The universe was vast and unpredictable, and they were just getting started. But for now, it was enough to be back on solid ground, surrounded by friends and possibilities. It was enough to simply be alive. Think they'll have cake waiting for us? Jax asked, her tone light. If they know what's good for them, Slinky replied, a dramatic flourish in his step. And if they don't? Quinn inquired, ever the optimist. Then we improvise, Vex said, a smile tugging at his lips. It's what we do best. They stepped into the sunlit expanse of Earth, the familiar sights and sounds washing over them like a balm. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was home. And for now, that was more than enough. Thelonious Vex leaned against a rusty railing in Earth's spaceport, squinting at the chaos like it was a bad painting that had somehow won an award. People buzzed around like over-caffeinated bees in a hive, all eager to catch a glimpse of the crew who'd tugged the wormhole back into shape with nothing but duct tape and a toaster. He'd never been one for public adoration. Fame was for the dead or the delusional. Jax nudged him with her elbow. You look like you're about to bite someone, he grunted. Considering it. The migraine, a familiar companion, was already threatening to split his skull open. I just don't get why we're the rock stars. Because we did the impossible, Jax said, her grin infectious. And we did it with style. Style's overrated, Vex muttered, watching as a gaggle of reporters swarmed past, their cameras flashing like hyperactive fireflies. Give me a quiet corner and a stiff drink any day. Quinn was holding his toaster aloft like it was some holy relic which, given their circumstances, it might as well have been. Hey, maybe we can get this thing into the Hall of Ancient Tech, right next to the first wheel. Don't push your luck, Quinn, Naya called from where she was fending off an overeager news crew with her best, I dare you to test my patience glare. You're one step away from being a museum piece yourself, Quinn just chuckled, unfazed. A man can dream. Slinky joined them, draping an arm over Vex's shoulders with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested he'd missed his true calling as a soap opera star. So, what's next, fearless leader? A book deal. Maybe a made-for-TV movie. Vex sighed, batting Slinky's arm away. If anyone tries to make a movie about this, I'm suing for libel. The attention was suffocating, but there was no denying the electric buzz of hope that crackled in the air. Earth was back on the map, and the universe suddenly felt a little smaller, a little more navigable. The crew had pulled off the impossible, and while Vex wasn't about to break out the confetti just yet, there was something to be said for seeing the home planet still spinning in the abyss. As the crew finally made it out of the spaceport, they were greeted by an unlikely sight. A parade, complete with banners and people cheering like they just defeated an alien armada. It was both heartening and slightly embarrassing. They do know we're just a bunch of idiots who got lucky, right? Jax asked, eyeing the spectacle with a mix of amusement and disbelief. Humans love an underdog story, Slinky said, raising his hands like a conductor before an orchestra. And what are we if not the universe's favorite underdogs? The crowd surged forward, surrounding them with eager faces and outstretched hands. Someone pressed a bouquet into Vex's hands, the flowers an unexpected burst of color against the drab backdrop. He looked down at them, bemused. Guess we're heroes now, Naya said, her tone light but her eyes serious. Heroes, Vex repeated, feeling the weight of the word settle over him. If we're heroes, the galaxy's in worse shape than I thought. The reality of their achievement was sinking in, and with it came the inevitable questions. What did this mean for humanity's place in the universe? How would they handle the challenges ahead? And perhaps most importantly, would anyone remember this in a year's time? Vex pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on the celebration. They'd earned it, and for now, that was enough. As the day wore on, the crew was ushered from one event to the next, each more lavish than the last. Speeches were made, glasses were raised, and somewhere along the way, the toaster was enshrined in a glass case as a symbol of human ingenuity, or sheer dumb luck, depending on who you asked. Zephyr, who had been quietly taking it all in, finally spoke up. "You know, for all the chaos, it's nice to see everyone so hopeful." "Hope," Vex said, rolling the word around like a pebble in his mouth. "Funny thing, isn't it? One minute you're knee-deep in despair, the next, you're the poster child for a better tomorrow. Just like life," Slinky quipped, twirling a drink in his hand with a flourish. One big cosmic joke. As the night drew on, Vex found himself standing at the edge of the festivities, watching the crowd with an unreadable expression. The reality of their achievement, the implications of reconnecting Earth with the galaxy, were beginning to settle in. "We did good, Vex," Jax said, joining him. Her voice was softer now, devoid of its usual bravado. "Yeah, I guess we did," Vex admitted, feeling the ghost of a smile tug at his lips. The zoo, that strange collection of Earth's biodiversity curated by curious aliens, had become a symbol of interstellar cooperation. It stood as a testament to what was possible when disparate worlds came together, and Vex couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride at being part of it all. Humanity had made its mark, and for better or worse they were here to stay. The celebrations continued late into the night, a blur of laughter, music, and clinking glasses. Vex found himself surrounded by his crew, their camaraderie as solid as ever despite the challenges they'd faced. "You think they'll remember us?" Slinky asked, leaning back in his chair with an easy grace. "Or will we just be another footnote in some history book?" "History loves a good story," Quinn said, his gaze thoughtful. "And we've given them one hell of a tale." Naya raised her glass, her expression one of quiet determination. "To the future, whatever it holds." They clinked their glasses together, the simple gesture carrying a weight of its own. As the night wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Vex found himself lingering on the edge of the festivities, his thoughts a jumble of hopes and fears for what lay ahead. He watched as his crew laughed and joked, their spirits undimmed by the trials they'd faced. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by nothing more than stubborn determination and a shared sense of purpose. But they were his crew, and that was enough. Vex looked up at the stars, the distant pinpricks of light that had guided them through so much darkness. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but for the first time in a long while he felt a sense of belonging. As the last of the revelers drifted away and the night slipped into silence, Vex allowed himself a moment of peace. They'd come a long way, and there was still much to be done. But for now it was enough to be standing here, surrounded by friends and possibilities. "All right, folks," Vex said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Time to pack it up. We've got work to do tomorrow." Jax stretched, a satisfied grin on her face. "You mean we've got a universe to save?" Vex chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's start with a good night's sleep and work our way up to saving the universe." With that, they turned away from the fading lights of the celebration and headed back to their ship. The future was unwritten, and the path ahead was uncertain, but they were ready to face it together, come what may. As they made their way back to their ship, Vex felt a familiar sense of anticipation settle over him. The universe was out there, waiting, and they had a role to play. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them head-on, with all the humor, grit, and determination that made them human. Thelonious Vex allowed himself a final glance at the stars before stepping into the ship. The galaxy was a big place, full of mysteries and wonders yet to be discovered. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to embrace it all. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs for the taking. And as long as they had each other, anything was possible. As the ship's doors closed behind them and they prepared to embark on their next adventure, Vex felt a sense of calm wash over him. They'd faced the unknown before, and they would do so again. Together. Thelonious Vex allowed himself a moment of reflection as the ship hummed to life around him, the familiar sounds a comforting reminder of all they'd accomplished. They were back on solid ground, and the universe was at their fingertips. The crew settled into their stations, their banter filling the air with a sense of camaraderie that was both familiar and reassuring. They'd been through hell and back, and they'd do it all over again if it meant protecting the ones they cared about. "All right, folks," Vex said, his voice carrying a note of determination. "Let's see what the universe has in store for us." With that, they set off into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but they were ready to meet it head-on, with all the humor, grit, and determination that made them human. As the ship sped through the stars, Thelonious Vex allowed himself a moment of peace. They'd come a long way, and there was still much to be done. But for now, it was enough to be here, surrounded by friends and possibilities. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but they were ready to face it together, come what may. And as long as they had each other, anything was possible.